When children announce that they're gay or lesbian, sometimes it's very difficult for their families and friends. But today we'll talk with two men who are part of organizations here in town that help minister to people in those situations. Stay with us for Austin Faith Dialogue.
Austin Faith Dialogue, at the crossroads of religion and life. A series highlighting the cultural and social interactions between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KXAN. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
We're glad you're here today on Austin Faith Dialogue. I'm Sandy Wilder, your host, and today we're talking with two people who work with organizations that help minister to families and friends of people who declare their sexuality, that they are either gay or lesbian. And these organizations help families in that difficult time. Our guest today, and I have to read the acronyms here, Tom Wynn. Tom, you're Vice President of PFLAG, which is Parents, Families, and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, right?
That's right.
Okay. And Herb Treat. And Herb, you're a member of PPGL, which is Presbyterian Parents of Gays and Lesbians.
That's right.
Good to have you both. My guess is that some people don't know a whole lot about these two organizations. So how about you describe, first of all, what PPGL and PFLAG are about, and then we'll talk some about your experiences.
Sure. You want me to start? PPGL started in Dallas in 1993 or 4 by a woman named Jane Laughlin, who's received a lot of publicity nationally in this regard. We've opened chapters in San Antonio and other places around the state, but basically it's intended as an environment for parents who are often shocked or dismayed or guilt-ridden when they discover that their parents are gay, when their children are gay or lesbian. And it's simply a warm, supportive environment in which we try to listen to folks and be there for them and tell them, look, it's all right, we've all been there before.
Right, okay. And Tom, tell us a little bit about PFLAG.
PFLAG, or Parents, Families, and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, has been around a very long time. I'm not sure when it was organized, but it's been in Austin for many years. We have something like 400 chapters around the United States. Even across the state of Texas, there's probably 17 or 20 chapters. Our Austin chapter is comprised of about, I think our current membership is about 56 families or individuals. We meet on the third Tuesday of every month at Grace United Methodist Church from 7 until 9. And our purposes are really threefold. We're interested in providing support because young people or older people who finally willing to recognize that they may be gay or lesbian, and people who are associated with them who really struggle with that information, that knowledge, need support. So we're there to, because this is a very adverse society, to try and offer people the support and encouragement to help them to cope with this information. We're also there to provide some educational opportunity, because not very many of us who are heterosexual really know very much about homosexuality. We grew up in a culture that was pretty homophobic, that was not supportive or informed about homosexuality, and so we have an awful lot of information that we need to gain in order to cope. And the third area is advocacy. PFLAG is there to try and provide some support for those who are interested in protecting the civil liberties of all persons, regardless of their circumstance or their sexual orientation, and in particular to lobby with the legislature and other groups for legislation against hate crimes. Hate is not a family value. There's nowhere in the Bible can we find any justification for discrimination or hatred or persecution of people just because of their sexual orientation.
Two very important organizations, but my guess would be that these are not organizations that either of you thought you might be participating in. I wonder if you'd be willing to share some of your own experience about how you came to be part of these organizations and what happened to you as your children spoke to you about their their choice.
Well, Tom reminded me there's some things that I should say also, that we meet monthly at First Presbyterian Church on the second Tuesday of the month at 7 p.m. And one of the very important differences between PFLAG and PPGL is the fact that we are not an advocacy group. As I said earlier, we try to be there to support parents who feel like they're in crisis, who feel like they need some help, and they don't feel like they can come out to the world, to their neighbors, to their friends about what can be a very dismaying event for them. But to get back to your question, we learned that our daughter was lesbian only about 5 years ago, and she's in her late 30s now. My wife and I think, were blind. In retrospect, you can look back and see all the signals that were there that somehow we missed. We accepted it very well. I think as a male, I accepted it more readily than my wife, but it came, of course, as a surprise, but not any shock, and I don't think that we felt any guilt or what did I do wrong kind of thing. We believe firmly that this is, the data show, as Tom was saying before the program, that approximately 10% of all human beings are homosexual, and we accept that as a fact. And the thing that my wife and I feel most sad about is that we didn't recognize it much earlier, so that we might have dealt with it and helped our daughter deal with it, because clearly for 35 years, obviously society is becoming much less homophobic, much more accepting, and it's possible for her to have a partner and live openly as a lesbian couple. But had we been more sensitive 20 years ago, we might have helped her through some painful periods, through some times when she probably was very, very lonesome and very confused over, gee, what's difficult, what's wrong with me, that sort of thing. I suspect all that. So that's really what we feel most badly about, is our failure to recognize this thing a long time ago.
And when this experience happened for you, when your daughter spoke to you, what support was there? What was it like at that point for you, particularly in relation to your church family?
Well, our church, at the time we lived in San Antonio, and now we live here, and the two churches were and have been very, very supportive. We are in environments, in both those places. Those are environments in which certainly there are people in that congregation who are homophobic. I don't doubt that at all. But the general tenor is one of no big deal. It's certainly no problem for the vast majority of the people that are there. And of course, we only moved to Austin 3 years ago, and of course it was one of the things that attracted us to that church, this openness and to deal with this kind of subject, this acceptance of differences.
And can you say a little bit about what your experience was like then, Tom?
Sure, I'd be happy to. My wife and I have 3 adult children. They're all grown up. Our oldest daughter is 30 and married with 2 wonderful children. Our youngest is also married, lives here in Austin, works for a computer manufacturing company. Our middle child is 27 years old. His name is also Thomas, and 5 years ago he told us that he is gay. We were absolutely devastated. We just didn't have a clue about that. Tom actually works now as a high school math teacher up in Minnesota, also coaches a debate squad. We're very proud of him. He's a very good student and a fine young man, a good citizen. But when he came out to us, it was very painful, both for him and for us. It was a real struggle. One of the observations that I've made is that for people of faith, this seems to be an even deeper struggle because of some bias that's been handed down through the church for all of these centuries. And I really agonized about it. In fact, for 2 years, I grieved. I grieved for the loss of this son that I thought that I had that was gone. The wonderful thing is that my son and I continued to talk. We weren't always gracious in our conversations. We had a lot of pain to go through and to work our way through, but we kept talking, and we're doing okay. But for 2 years, it was a very, very deep struggle. At a certain point, we just resolved that, well, we weren't going to talk about that anymore. We were just going to dodge the issue. So in our telephone conversations on the weekends, sometimes we would just avoid the subject. And if we avoided it for very long, Tom would be back in our face saying, you know, it seems like maybe you're getting a little more comfortable with this. And the answer was, well, no, we're really not getting more comfortable with this. We're really having a problem. That my wife and I were hoping that maybe this was just some transitory phase that he would pass through. We thought maybe he made a mistake, he was in error. We didn't know what might be going on. We had hoped, I guess, we prayed intensely that maybe it might be possible for him to change. But the likelihood is that will not happen, that he is what he is. And
so then what was your experience through all this in your faith family?
in my faith family, my pastors recognized almost immediately that there was something wrong. I wasn't my usual self. And an assistant pastor that we had at the time, who was I was very close with, said, "There's something going on, and we need to talk." And I said, "Yes, I think we do." And so I told her, explained to her what had happened, and she commiserated with me. She's a very compassionate, caring woman. But that it was nice to know that there were people who loved me and who cared about me and who assured me that everything was well with us. But still, there was a part inside that really hurt. And at a certain point, after, like I say, about 2 years, my son, in one of our telephone conversations, gave me a phone number for an organization in Austin, PFLAG. PFLAG stands for Parents, Families, and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. And he made me promise that I would call that number. And so I kept the promise and called. I didn't know what it would be like going to a meeting devoted to this kind of purpose, but my wife and I got our courage all up, and off we went. And we discovered that we really weren't alone at all, that there were a lot of folks there. People come to PFLAG probably people stay in PFLAG for different reasons. Some are there for the fellowship and the camaraderie and the support. Some are there for the educational programs. Some are there for learning about opportunities for advocacy, as I mentioned. But it's not primarily an advocacy organization. I think we're there primarily as a support organization. Mm-hmm. At least initially, most people come there when they're hurting, as I was hurting.
Right.
There was a lot of pain there and a lot of struggle. And it gave me some hope to look at the other people in our support group and recognize that some months or years perhaps before, that they had been in about the same place that I was, and that they seemed to be okay with it now, and maybe that offered just a glimmer of hope.
Sounds like it became another kind of family for you.
Yes.
And we'll come
Indeed.
back to some more conversation in the second half of Austin Faith Dialogue. Stay with us on Austin Faith Dialogue. Welcome back for the second half of Austin Faith Dialogue. I'm Sandy Wilder, your host today, and you've just seen some announcements. Here's a couple more we didn't have time to get up on screen. On March 3rd and 4th, a Tuesday and Wednesday, there will be an antique show to benefit the Golden Age Nursing Home in Lockhart. For information, you can call the home. Here's their telephone number, 512-398-2362. And the other announcement is about the 6th International Conference on Women's Spirituality. The theme of this conference is Divine Intuition, Women's Ways of Prophecy and Prediction. The conference is scheduled for Friday through Sunday, March 13th through 15th. It'll be at the Red Lion Hotel here in town, co-sponsored by the Foundation for a Compassionate Society, New Texas Magazine, Celebration, and Bookwoman here in Austin. Men are welcome too, by the way, at this conference. And for more information, you can call Pat Cuny at 247-2597. And now we go back to conversation with our guests today, two men who are members of organizations locally that help people whose children have discovered that they are gay or lesbian, and the families need some help. We have Tom Wynn, who is the Vice President of PFLAG, which is Parents, Families, and Friends of Lesbians and Gays.
That's right.
And Herb Treat, who's a member of, we always have to look at the acronym, PPGL, Presbyterian Parents of Gays and Lesbians. And while we talk this half, I'd like for us to focus more on the work of these two organizations, now that you've shared some of your stories of how you got here. Herb, tell us a little bit about what PPGL attempts to do, maybe some of its successes, some of its challenges, how it's attempting to reach out to people.
Well, the organization is very new in Austin, and so to say that we have successes is probably an exaggeration, although we'd like to claim some. It's very new. We've only been meeting for, I'd say, 3 or 4 months now, as I mentioned earlier, at First Presbyterian on the second Tuesday of the month. We have publicized the organization through various church bulletins and worship newsletters and bulletins, and simply have invited folks to come who wish to come. Again, it's intended to be simply a non-threatening, people telling their stories or sitting and listening. There's no pressure to participate at all, especially if it's the first experience for folks who are really in some kind of shock over perhaps a recent discovery. We simply share stories about our children and the discovery, and I was interested in noting a few minutes ago when we were talking the difference that Tom and I had to the news when we discovered our children were gay and lesbian respectively. And I think this is a fact of life, that different people respond entirely differently, and it's something that we try to simply be there to listen if they want to listen, and to tell our own stories, simply to be in a supporting environment, and that's all we really do.
Sorry, are you one of the facilitators of the group, or one of the officers?
There are three couples who are really the I guess the proper term is facilitator, yes, who are really the people who have pulled this together and who try to help those who come, right?
Okay. Tell us a little bit about PFLAG, whose acronym is pretty well known, but perhaps not much about what the group does.
Maybe it might be well just to talk a little bit about what the group is. One of the things that I really value about PFLAG is that it's really a mix, a very pleasing mix of parents and grandparents and siblings and gay people and lesbian people and their friends. And in that mix, with some openness and some graciousness and some welcoming, there's an opportunity for us all to learn from one another and to share stories and to grow. What happens in a PFLAG meeting to begin with is some refreshments as people arrive and they're welcomed, and then we have some brief business items to take care of. Sort of a necessary evil, I guess, of any organization. And then we move into some very interesting educational programs. Very, very, very good. We had a marvelous one last night on the internet, and helping to demystify the internet and to get people on it and working with it, more comfortable with it, but also talking about what the internet can mean for gays and lesbians, and what it can mean for advocacy, and what it can mean for educational opportunity, the resource of the internet. If you're a young person who's struggling with your sexuality, you're thinking maybe there's something different about you, or wrong, something that doesn't seem quite right, or at least doesn't square with your friends, you know, who do you turn to? It can be pretty dangerous. It can be pretty frightening. And we've learned that there's a much higher incidence of suicide among gay and lesbian young people than among people who are straight. It's tragic. It's just tragic. But the internet provides an opportunity for people in the security of their cubicle in the library, or perhaps from their dormitory room or their room at home, to get some additional information, and maybe to make contact with some folks who can help to reassure them that they're not so peculiar, that there's plenty of company. So PFLAG is an interesting mix, and I like that. We have a support group that meets after the educational session. It's an opportunity for people to gather and to say whatever is on their heart. We basically go around the circle and people tell their stories, or pass, as the case may be. No one's pressured to say or do anything. We don't try to change people or to make them feel good about this new information about their children or about themselves. We just try to help people to understand a little better that what they're going through, others have been there too, and it's pretty common, unfortunately or unfortunately. It seems to be a problem of much bigger proportions than most of us might have supposed. At the time when our son came out to us, I didn't personally know, I wasn't acquainted with anyone who had been through the same experience that I was. I knew some gay and lesbian people from work and that I'd been associated with in the church and others, but I didn't know another dad or another mom of a gay child. And at PFLAG I found that there were people like me. It seems to be a much bigger problem than we might have thought. Statistics say that about 1 out of every 10 human beings is gay or lesbian. Statistics would seem to indicate that somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 out of every 4 families has a gay or lesbian child. What that translates to me is that there are an awful lot of people out there who are probably really hurting, who could use some support and some education and some opportunities to unburden themselves just a little bit.
Sounds like a real opportunity for ministry. And so it dawns on me then to wonder, in both of your experiences, what would you have wanted from your church family? You described, for instance, Herb, discovering that you might have been able to help your daughter years earlier. If that were to have happened, how might your church family have supported you and worked with you?
Well, that's a tough question. I think ideally the fact that my daughter is lesbian would have been completely invisible and completely unimportant. That, of course, is not a fact of life in our society. I'm sorry, I really, in my own case, or in our own case, the church where we are has been very, very supportive. It's difficult for me to find a way that they could really have done more than they have done, because we feel very comfortable there. Now, my daughter does not attend church at all and has been unwilling to talk with us about her alienation from the church, because we've been active Presbyterians our entire married lives. But beyond that, I think that First Presby anyway, and also in University Presby in San Antonio, has been very open and accepting.
You also, my guess would be, have run across people whose faith families have not been supportive of them. What might you say to those groups?
Well, it's terribly disappointing to see the kind of responses that many churches, which are typically on the front pages, we all know which churches they are, or we can find them easily enough. It's terribly disappointing for me anyway to see churches closing the doors and being judgmental. The ultimate test, as far as I'm concerned, is what would Christ have done? How would Christ have reacted to these folks who have a different perspective on sexuality than the majority of the population, but because they're a minority does not mean that they're wrong or they're sinful or come in any of those categories that they should be shunned. At least that's my very strongly held opinion. If I may short-tail a little bit on what Tom said, I think one of the nice things about the PFLAG meetings, and my wife and I are also members of PFLAG, many people think that they don't know lesbians and gays, and you can go to these meetings and find out that, gee, it's safe. There are many gays and lesbians there, and you're safe, and you can be comfortable with them, and these folks are nice folks. Similarly, I suspect, I can't speak for them, I suspect that the gays and lesbians come to those meetings because there are heterosexuals there who accept them for what they are. And it's, again, it's a non-threatening environment. They can come to a meeting with heterosexuals who as I said, accept them, and they don't have to feel, well, now how is that guy looking at me, or what is he thinking of me? I think PFLAG is a marvelous organization.
Great. And before I get to you, Herb, with that same question, I'm sorry, Bill, Tom, there.
It's okay.
I should look at my notes. Before I get to you, Tom, with that same question that I just asked Herb, let's make sure we get the telephone numbers, too, of the organizations up on the screen. So while we're talking, the number will be up there. By the same token, how has your faith family supported you, and what might you say to others whose faith families have perhaps not been so supportive?
Thank you. Before I answer that, just to say that the numbers that people can see on their screen right now are for each of our organizations' helplines. It's a place where people can call, especially if they're in a struggle or feeling a good deal of anxiety about some new information about this, and would just like to talk to someone. Call at any time. As far as the church, I'm a very active member of Peace Lutheran Church in Northwest Austin. Have been a Bible teacher for 30+ years, and I must say that the church has been supportive to me in a pastoral way. My pastors have shared their compassion with me, and we've tried together to find a balance between theological integrity and compassion that all people of faith struggle to find. I think, though, that there are still an awful lot of people in the church for whom this business of gay and lesbian is still a taboo. It's not something that people want to talk about, want to hear about, really want to have very much dialogue about it. And I wish that there was more opportunities for some good dialogue and for some serious Bible study.
30 minutes is just not near enough time to talk, though, unfortunately. We'll come back at some future show. So thank you so much for being here, Tom and Herb, and thank you for joining us today on Austin Faith Dialogue.